Now that we can calculate empirical formulas, we are ready for our last step in our process of formula calculations, which is calculating the true molecular formula. Okay. The true formula is the actual number of atoms in a compound. So how this compound actually exists in nature. Okay. So we can calculate our empirical formula, but then we need to get to the true molecular formula. So how do we do that? Step 1, find the empirical formula. That's what we learned how to do in our last lesson. Step 2, find the mass of that empirical formula. So we're going to use our periodic tables to add up the mass of the empirical formula. Step 3, we're going to divide the molecular mass, so the true mass, by the empirical mass. Okay, and in these problems, that molecular mass is going to be provided to you. Then, once you've done that division, you will multiply each subscript in the empirical formula by the answer you got in step 3. Okay, so molecular formula mass divided by empirical formula mass. Multiply the subscripts by that number. Let's do an example problem. All right, the empirical formula for ethylene is CH2. Okay, so step 1 has already been done for us. We were given the empirical formula, so we don't need to go through the steps like we did in the last lesson of creating that empirical formula on our own. All right, so find the molecular formula if the molecular mass is 28.1 grams per mole. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, since we already have the empirical formula, is we need to find the mass of the empirical formula. So look at our periodic table. C is 12.01, H is 1.01, but I have 2 of those, so 2 times 1.01, and add those together to get your total. Okay, so my empirical mass is 14.03 by adding those together. Okay, next I need to find, I have my molecular mass. So now we divide. We do molecular mass, 28.01, divided by empirical mass, which I just added up to be 14.03. Pop that into our calculator, we get 2. Okay, now sometimes you may get 1.99. That's close enough to 2, you're good. You may get 2.004. That's okay too. That's still close enough to 2. And it won't always be 2. Sometimes it might be 3 or 4, etc. But just know that it's okay if it's like 1.99. It's still good. It still counts. Okay? All right, next step. We got this number 2. Now what we're going to do is we're going to multiply all of the subscripts in the empirical formula by 2. So there's 1C. 1 times 2 becomes 2. There's 2 H's. 2 times 2 becomes 4. Okay? So my molecular formula, or my true formula for this compound, is C2H4. Okay? If you do not understand what I just did, if you're still having trouble with the steps of empirical formula, get into contact with me so that I can help you out, because now it's time for us to do some independent practice.